The Electoral Commission has gazetted new rules that could penalise political parties and candidates for publishing misleading election content ahead of South Africa's 2026 local government elections. The draft Electoral Code of Conduct on Countering Disinformation introduces measures to address the use of artificial intelligence, deepfakes and other digital tools that could be used to manipulate voters and undermine electoral integrity. For more on this, we're joined by IEC Vice Chairperson, Commissioner Janet Love. Commissioner Love, good evening. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Outline for us what the code spells out to be appropriate practice in terms of disseminating information and what the punitive measures look like for those who transgress it.
So this is a component of the Electoral Code in general. So it spells out, firstly, our understanding of the importance of ensuring that we have an election in an environment which is not compromised by active and malicious disinformation. And we then provide some guidance to candidates and political parties as to what needs to be done in order for us to collectively embrace this challenge. The code spells out that different candidates' parties need to not just uphold the code of conduct insofar as disinformation is concerned, and also take responsibility themselves for not disseminating false information or information that they reasonably can see is false information, but also to take steps to correct where there is information that has been disseminated that turns out to have been done, that this has been done without it having been checked properly, that there can be corrective measures, and to make their own supporters aware of the dangers and the threats and so on. So that's what the draft that's been published traverses. It deals with a number of these issues, and we're hoping to get feedback by tomorrow as it's the closing day, and then to finalize the code in time for it to be combined with the overall Electoral Code of Conduct so that all of the contestants can be made aware of its contents, but also then undertake to comply with the code. In terms of penalties, the penalties that are there are a range of penalties, but they include the possibility of being sentenced to prison. But these are things that would need judicial processes. And our appeal is really to contestants and members of the public to make sure that in order for code of conduct issues to be able to be adjudicated well, they need to think of it in those terms. They need to think of it that the evidence that is put before the Commission needs to be sufficiently robust so that it can stand up before a court of law.
You used the term reasonableness in your framing of what is expected on part of candidates and political actors. What does that reasonable test look like? To what extent or how far are political actors expected to go to determine the veracity and credibility of anything that they disseminate and or share on social media? Because some might say they inadvertently, with good intention, shared something they had no idea.
I think that in the context within which we live, we all know that it has become increasingly difficult at times for us to be able to distinguish some manufactured posts, some posts that are created as a result of manipulations and so on. So clearly there is a real threat of people disseminating incorrect information inadvertently. But the rule of thumb really has to be that you can't disseminate information until you have tried to check that information. And part of our engagement with contestants and political parties is that if there is information that they do receive that they haven't heard of before they disseminate it, they need to check, and the Commission has stood ready to avail itself to have that kind of information checked when it pertains to the Commission itself. When it pertains to the information around other political actors and so on, again, I think that we need to say to all of the contestants that it's essential for them, again, to be checking. If there is evidence that people have genuinely checked and still disseminated, and then it is found to be wrong, I think that's why the code expressly requires of people of contestants to commit themselves to rectify any incorrect information that inadvertently they may have disseminated. The big concern is not to check.
Okay, just a last question I do want to ask, Commissioner. Does the Commission have the resources to be able to make the determinations around this information? I can imagine a situation, particularly where the test is a criminal injuria test or a defamation test very specifically. I can imagine a situation where political actor or political party A shares a video on social media saying, look, this political party whose supporters are wearing their T-shirts are harassing and attacking voters who stand in our name, and they share that on social media, and it may well turn out that it wasn't actually people acting on part of that political party. They may have, and this is a case that's happened before, by the way, they may have worn their T-shirts, but it doesn't mean that they in earnest represented that party. In such an instance, how does the Commission adjudicate that?
Well, firstly, just to emphasize again, the Commission's role is really not an adjudicative one. The Code of Conduct issues are things that at the end of the day do have to be determined in, and that's been the decision of the courts, do have to be determined by the Electoral Court. I think what the Commission has got the capacity to do is to assist with the collaboration and partnerships that it has with the National Editors Forum and with other civil society partners and people who have expertise in AI to facilitate the possibility for reports that are digital to be checked for whether or not they've been manipulated. But when it comes to actual information that is disseminated on social media and has no and is not something that we are certain of, I think what we've really tried to emphasize is if you're not certain, do not disseminate before you've checked through other means. And beyond saying that that is a responsibility that all contestants need to take on board, not just for the possibility of avoiding sanction, but for a recognition that if it were to happen to them, it's got very, very negative effects, but also it takes away the possibility for our citizens to have a commitment to a process like elections and to feel that they will be properly heard as voters.
Commissioner, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. As the Vice Chairperson of the IEC, Commissioner Janet Love, talking to us there on the newly gazetted Regulation and Code of Conduct